Hey, you're watching my channel Cloud Busted. So today's video, I'm doing a video on the custom RC chassis I made because I've been getting a lot of questions about these lately. So I figured I would just do a video and try to explain some of the questions I frequently get asked. So right there are three chassis. This one and this one are replicas of my full-size monster truck. So they're not like similar or look a lot like a full-size monster truck. They're an A-scale copy of my full-size truck, and I made a jig and a bunch of fixtures and everything, so they're all the same. So I don't just like hold parts up and weld them in. I actually made a jig and a chassis table just like I would make if I were doing a chassis on a full-size truck. And then this one, the one all the way to the right, that's a 10 scale clodbuster chassis. Uses factory clodbuster axles that I built for a guy. I ended up not using this chassis because I changed a few designs, so eventually I'll complete it. But for now, it's just kind of got scrapped and I restarted it. And I actually make a lot of these. I make a ton of these 10 scale clodbuster chassis. The only reason I don't really do videos on them is because I tell the people who buy them, any of these chassis, I don't care, they could take the credit for building it. I'm not really concerned about getting credit. I'm more concerned about getting paid. So this one's made out of chromoly steel. So it's pretty heavy, but it's strong. It's pretty much indestructible. You could drop this thing off of a 10-story building and probably be okay. I could probably drive over my Peterbilt and it wouldn't hurt it. Links are made out of 70-75 aluminum. Those are just dummy axles right here. I just ship them with these so that way it just holds the links in place. And I took a deposit on this chassis a while ago, but given the nature of 2020, I told the guy take as long as he needs to pay for the rest of it. I'm in no hurry to unload it, so I'll hold it for him. He gave me his deposit. He's a cool guy. So the one in the middle, this one is the same as this, but it's made out of 6061 aluminum, which is a very high grade aluminum. 70-75 is a little bit stronger, but the problem with 70-75, it's not weldable, so that's why I'm using the 6061. And these are time consuming because when I weld these parts, even though I put it in a jig and a bunch of fixtures, aluminum gets to a certain temperature and wants to collapse, and also aluminum shrinks and expands a lot more than the chromoly or steel, so it's pretty tricky to weld. Everything's got to be done in a certain order or else it gets all twisted up. And also with these two chassis, when they're done, I send them out to get heat treated. I'm also working on a titanium version of this, but the problem is I haven't really welded too much titanium. Every now and then somebody brings me like a bicycle part or something like that. And with the titanium, what I have to do is what's called back purge it. I fill the tubes up with argon. So I don't know if I'll have to do that with something like this in titanium. If so, that would be a lot of work because that would mean drilling tiny holes where all these tubes meet and somehow make a piece so I could fill the tubes with argon. So I don't know if I have to do that or not. I always did that just because they say you're supposed to. So I don't know. Once I get the titanium in, I already ordered it. It really wasn't as expensive as I thought it would be. I'll just have to play around with a couple practice pieces, and if it's worth it, I'll build one. But also another thing about the titanium is when I make these pieces, I have to notch them so they fit up perfectly. So that way when I do all these welds, it's a nice clean weld. So the titanium, I would imagine I'll have to do it in my mill and use like a special end mill. So I don't know, I'm going to have to get back to you guys on that one. But again, I don't like doing too many videos on these, so that way people who buy them can tell everybody they made them. So let's take a look at this 10 scale cloud chassis. So if you take a look at the frame rails on the top, if you notice they bend in like that. And that's so I could get a better shock angle, because I use factory clodbuster axles. So if I just kept the rail straight, the shocks would be straight like this. It would allow for a lot of body roll. The thing would twist a lot. So if they're angled in and back a little bit, it'll keep it way more stable. That's one of the things I like about the Losi LMT. It puts the shocks at a good angle where most RCs are just straight. And even if you look at a full-size monster truck like this, some chassis have straight rails where some are curved, like the CRD chassis, and some other ones curve in like this. Whereas I'm using a Concussion Motorsports chassis, and also like Patrick chassis, they're straight, but I also run a wider axle housing so I get the proper shock angle. So that's why some RC chassis I make straight rails, and some RC chassis I make curved rails depending on what width axle someone wants to run. Because really, what good is an aftermarket chassis if it doesn't perform well? It's really just a cool looking piece of metal at that point. So far I'm very pleased with the way this chassis is coming out. And this is meant to use the Losi Super Rock Ray motor and transmission. It fits right in there. And and the drive shafts are centered, and it sits very low in the chassis, so it gives you awesome center of gravity, but also a perfect drive shaft angle. I still have to finish some of the welding down here, and I also have to add the brackets inside to make all the mounts double shear. Well, you can see everything's TIG welded, and not only do I weld on the outside, but I also weld everything on the inside. And like I said, it's going to be double shear, meaning there's going to be a bracket right here on the inside too. So it's going to be very, very strong. And like I said, I still have to weld down here. And once this is done, it's going to have a cage, just like this one. Looks just like the full-size monster truck. And what's pretty cool is, just by coincidence, an Armo Mojave body fits perfectly on there, like it was meant to be. So that's pretty cool. An Armo Mojave, I believe, is a 1/7 scale, and this truck is an exact A scale copy of my full-size truck. So even though it's called A scale, it's way bigger than most. It's actually even a little bit bigger than X-Max. And the IMAX Jumbo Kong tires fit perfectly on there. I plan to have the first one of these built running by now, but then I ended up selling it, so a guy gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I figured, all right, I'll build another one, and then another guy wanted to buy this one. So it's like I'm always working on stuff for everybody else and never get time for my own projects. So it's probably going to be a little bit before I make any more of these to sell, and it's only because, one, I want to perfect the steering system. Even though most of the time I sell these just a chassis, I want to make sure if somebody wants to, they have a good way of putting a nice reliable steering system in it. And also, once these are done, they have to be heat treated. So there's a somewhat local place that does heat treating for me, but they always tell me it's going to take like 2 weeks. It ends up taking 2 months. And every time I go there, he says he's real busy, but every time I go there, his heat treat oven is often empty. So I've actually found them at a reasonable price. They're not as expensive as I thought they would be, so it looks like I'll be buying my own. So once I get these things set up to where I can like crank them out at a reasonable time, it usually takes me now about 2 months to finish the chassis, and then I got to send it out to get it heat treated. So overall, like, who wants to wait like 4 months for a chassis to be built? So once I get the heat treat oven, and then I can make these things a lot faster, that's when I'll probably start making a lot more to sell. So as far as prices go, the Chromoly one probably be about $600, which that's pretty cheap for the amount of time I get in plus materials. I get a little more for an aluminum one. Aluminum one's usually right around $900, and that's because it's 6061 aluminum, and welding is just so time consuming because the aluminum moves so much. If it's not welded in the correct order, things get twisted and they shrink at different rates and things don't line up. So that's got to be done in just the right order. Both frame rails have to be welded very consistently, meaning like whatever order I weld this frame in, I got to do the other one the same, so that way they shrink the same, and I got to do it quickly. And then also with the aluminum one, because aluminum likes to collapse when you weld it, I could be TIG welding this thing and then it just falls apart if I don't do it right. So I have to make all kinds of like fixtures and jigs, and a lot of extra work goes into making the aluminum one. And then as far as the titanium one goes, like I said, I don't have a ton of experience welding titanium, so I'm going to attempt one, see how it goes. I also don't know if the advantages to the titanium would really be worth it, because I know something like this is like bomb-proof, whereas this is very strong too and it's way lighter. So I'm sure titanium will fall somewhere in the middle. It'll probably be a little heavier than this, a little bit lighter than this, and as far as strength-wise, it'll probably be somewhere in the middle. So I don't know if titanium will be worth the effort and the cost, but if I do, expect titanium to be around $1,200 for a chassis, and that's a lot of money to spend for an RC chassis. But if it never breaks, and it's also an authentic looking RC monster truck. So I hope that answered a lot of questions for the people who are interested. One other thing is, a guy recently asked me if the RC four-wheel drive digger axles would fit, because he said he was interested in a chassis and he's got those axles. So this one right here, these dummy axles are the exact width of the real housings I'll be making. And end to end, those are 10 inches. So if that's what those RC four-wheel drive axles are, 10 inches wide, that'd be perfect. So anyway, I hope that answered a lot of questions. Take care, thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and hit the bell.